I stopped recording. I didn't want to, but I got confused. So Eddie's not actually talking about himself in the third person. It's gone from like this weird transitional heat waves thing, from him talking to Danny to Hans Bock telling the story, and we're now hearing about Danny in the third person, I think. Anyway, yes, so that's what's happening. And this is now part 2 of welcome back to another episode of Drinking and Reading. Coffee and Weird Tales. Coffee's a little cold, but that's okay. We're just gonna keep reading now and move into part 2 of Dimensional Doors by Hans Bock for Weird Tales magazine, January 1944. Yes, and when last we left off, Eddie had just, you know, sat himself down across from Danny in a bar. I can't remember what the bar's called. It's crowded, and Eddie's scared of something. He keeps looking over his shoulder. I don't know, maybe it's just because he's really scared. He's being a tool, and very rude, and I don't know. Danny's taking it well. Taking it better than I would. I would have told Eddie to fuck off immediately. But anyway, I digress. Let's read the story. Yes, everything had become light and swimmy, the way things look on a hot day when waves of warm air ripple up from the ground and make the landscape shimmer. But it was not a warm day. It was night in late autumn and briskly cold. Eddie had reason for feeling dizzy. He had not eaten for 3 days. He limped a little as he plodded along the dark streets, his hands thrust for warmth into the pockets of his threadbare suit coat. He trudged, discouraged, tired, his shoulders hunched, and his head drooping, his glance occasionally flickering up to the passers-by, resenting their complacent comfort, their well-fed looks and dressy clothes. Yeah, it's not cool. It's kind of a shit situation to be in. Anyway, he stopped at the window of a cafeteria and peered through the green mist of a neon sign, envying the crowd around the counters, stocking up on food. There was a wonderful odor of good things to eat. A blend of savory meat, coffee, and sweet dampness of fresh bread. The sweet dampness of fresh yum. I love that smell. Now, maybe if he hadn't, you know, run away from home, I don't know. Yeah, we've all got our fucking problems. Anyway, he was ravenous. He gazed, sick with envy, until the chill wind whisked dead leaves past him with a papery rustling like the voices of discontented ghosts. He turned away and saw that there was a park across the street, with benches lined under the nearly naked trees. Well, there at least was a place where he might sit without having to pay for the privilege. He crossed the road, picked a bench in the shadows, and seated himself with sigh. Fog was rolling in from the bay. People grew fewer and fewer. Eddie began to shiver, his teeth to chatter. He bit on a lip to control his shaking. The fog thickened, veiling the streets, dwindling the streetlights into mere blurs. Eddie felt as though he were in a private world all his own. Hours seemed to pass. And then, as Landvik came, what? Who? As Landvik, capital A, this is a name, Aslanvik came. Eddie heard him before he saw him. The mist seemed to amplify sounds. There was a thud of feet on the pavement, forecasting the giant which Aslanvik turned out to be. Unconsciously, Eddie faced the approaching tread. After a few seconds, a black bulk broke from the grey folds of fog, and Eddie saw the man, saw Aslanvik. about. He was a monster of a man. Eddie was 6'1" and thought himself tall, but the newcomer was huge even to him. Around 6'8". He was shrouded in a dark cloak that hung down almost to his heels. Mysterious. And his hat was pulled far over his eyes. His entrance... May as well. Fucking may as well. And his hat was pulled far over his eyes. His entrance was theatrical His entrance was theatrical, melodramatic, like the scenes where the devil appears to the young hero and offers to buy his soul. Good. Fuck, that's really hard to say. I don't know why. Aslanvik peered from right to left, craning out his head as though expecting to find someone he knew waiting for him, but nobody was around except for Eddie. Then the giant glimpsed the young man and went over to him, a tall black blur in a universe of mist. Eddie looked over him as he sat down on the bench. Yeah, fucking Eddie. Always sizing people up and judging. Aslanvik took a cigarette case from his coat, snapped the lid open and held it toward Eddie. "Have a smoke," he offered. Just those few words told Eddie that the man was a foreigner, but he could not place the accent. Later he found that it was not so much Aslanvik's accent that gave him the alien touch. What? That gave him that alien touch. It was the curious expression of his voice and his odd mannerisms. The cigarette case glinted faintly. It was a beautifully wrought golden one and... nice. Looked very expensive. Eddie thought, this fellow ought to have money. I ought to ask him something. I ought to ask him for something. I'm hungry. He was almost tearful at the idea of food. He went so far as to open his mouth, but he could not speak. Damn it, he couldn't beg. He'd always been independent. Now he had nothing except his pride. And if he let that go, he wouldn't have a thing at all. No, he wouldn't ask. But... yeah. Good for you, Eddie. No, he wouldn't ask. He didn't accept a cigarette. He did accept a cigarette, though, but his fingers shook to such an extent that the slip of tobacco dropped between his numb fingers and fell to the walk. He reached down for it, but Aslanvik caught his arm. Let it go. Take another. Oh, gentlemen. In the flare of Aslanvik's lighter, their eyes mutually searched each other. Okay. Eddie saw a long ebony face like that of a Gothic statue, almost out of proportion, equine in length, but not in character. Cat-like, rather. The pupils of the eyes were so dilated that Eddie imagined the eyes to be gypsy black. They were deep set and cavernous, unfathomable. His expression was, well, enigmatic. Eddie couldn't quite riddle it. A poker face, mask-like. And then Eddie had typed it. What? A poker face, mask-like. And then Eddie had typed it. A dead face in which only the eyes lived. My goodness. Oh, that's fine then. Oh, maybe like death. Okay. The lighter's flame winked out. Aslanvik put the little box away and the two men drew on their cigarettes. The fragrant smoke was so pleasant that Eddie momentarily relaxed and probably fell to trembling again. Aslanvik glanced at him. Well, the giant said, you ought to be wearing a coat in this kind of weather. Eddie invented a laugh. At least he meant for it. He meant it for one, but it sounded like dried bread being crunched through a meat grinder. I can't even imagine what that sounds like. I would if I had a job, he said. Don't let's talk about it, or I'll wind up telling you a hard luck story. Don't bullshit, Eddie. You know you want to tell him the story. He took another drag upon his smoke and tried to smile. Aslanvik asked, out of work? Eddie nodded. You've really tried to find something to do? That touched a sore spot. Eddie asked vehemently, do you think I like sleeping out in the open? Sorry, but I should think a young man like you wouldn't have difficulty in obtaining some sort of a position. Eddie smiled crookedly. Wait until you've tried. Oh, shut the fuck up, Eddie. Anyway. No, but really, go home. Go home, and I'm sure your stepmother will be okay. And because you said she was. Fuck, I don't like Eddie. Anyway. Is that mean? Am I just being mean? I can't tell. Something about him really just rubs me up the wrong way. Anyway. Fucking Eddie. Aslanvik seemed to ponder, well, have you a place to sleep tonight? Eddie shook his head. He didn't like thinking about it. Somehow it made the night twice as cold. Abruptly, Aslanvik arose. He touched Eddie's shoulder. Here, you'd better come along with me. I have an extra room in my place, and you may turn out to be the very man I'm looking for. Eddie stared up incredulously. Come on, Aslanvik urged cheerfully, his hand again tapping Eddie's shoulder. Eddie warmed with the dawning. Thoughts of a meal and a warm, soft bed. And then the vision snapped out like a blown flame. Was this man a plainclothesman about to lead him smack to a jail? Oh, a plainclothes, probably police officer, yeah, whatever. Eddie drew himself upright slowly, feeling as though he were about to be hung. Jail! To be hung for being homeless? Did that ever happen? What? Eddie drew himself upright slowly, feeling as though he were about to be hung. And it's hanged, okay? It's hanged. Jail! That would be the last straw. It wasn't his fault that he was broke and hungry. God knew he tried. Yeah, fuck. You didn't. You tried to be annoying to everyone. What happened? Yeah, anyway. Fuck off, Eddie. God knew he tried. Aslanvik understood. Don't worry. I'm not a policeman. He patted Eddie's back, starting the lad down the walk. As they went along, he asked, where are your people? Well, my folks are dead, I guess. Oh, shut up, Eddie. My God. The giant smiled ever so slightly. Good, he said, and again. Good. Oh, fuck. This story just got really weird. Anyway, okay. Maybe a couple more minutes, I think, because as weird as it is, it's still interesting. It was like being in a world of their own as they moved along. Not a soul to be seen or heard, only a few indistinct noises of distant traffic. Eddie had not the slightest idea as to which way they were taking, but Aslanvik did not act like a lost man. Finally they arrived at a little side door opening on a lightless alley. It was padlocked. Aslanvik unbuttoned his long coat, pulled out a chain of keys, and opened the padlock, then a tumbler lock. He pushed the door inward and waved Eddie ahead. Here we are. You go first. I'll switch on the light. Switch on the light first. Anyway. whatever. It was an old building, not very clean. The paint was flaking from the cracked plaster of the walls, and the air reeked of cheap incense. The steps creaked as the two climbed them. Yeah, Eddie, you beggars can't be beggars. Don't you start getting fucking choosy now. At the landing was a second door, also double-locked. Slanvik opened it, preceded Eddie inside. Lights blazed as Eddie crossed the threshold, and he halted, stunned. It was as though he had stepped into the Arabian Nights. Okay. It was inconceivable, all the splendour. The commonplace stairway had disarmed him from expecting anything like this. Well. First he saw the blaze of scarlet and gold tapestries that hid the walls. They hung from a point not quite in the centre of the ceiling and spread out like a tent. The floor was 3 deep, with moss-soft rugs glowering with rich colour. Glowering with rich colour? Glowing? Because that's not what it says. Maybe it's a typo. There were cabinets, tables and chairs carved from glossy black wood, carved in the strangest shapes imaginable. Tangled monsters, dragons, looping snakes, weird feathered beasts which Eddie could not recognise. On the tables were carelessly strewn rainbows carved, ponderous books whose metal covers were encrusted with jewels, curious little statues of fantastic monsters, and oddly distorted humans more like the people of another world than of this. The lights glared from gemmed chandeliers whose distorted lines suggested fire patterns for the construction of mythical wonders. Slanvik somberly watched Eddie's reactions. You like it? Eddie bent his head in acquiescence. Slanvik shed his coat and hung it up, motioning for Eddie to sit down. Eddie lowered himself to a chair that was a scaly tiger shape. A scaly tiger shape? This is a weird story. A little frightened of it. Then why would you sit on it? For it looked so alive, as if at his touch it would turn upon him. But I sat in it anyway, because I'm Eddie and I do weird things, and I'm a weird person in general. Weird, annoying, and possibly very stupid. Slanvik took a decanter and 2 glasses from one of the cabinets. He poured out 2 drinks, stopped the flask, and handed Eddie a glass. The liquid was clear and grey in colour. It had a piercing, spicy odour. Slanvik tossed his down, and in a swallow, Eddie cautiously tasted his own. It was aromatic, like cough medicine, but going down it felt wonderful. Again, Eddie, beggars. And now, Slanvik said, well, we'll repair to the kitchen and see what we can find to eat. That sounds good, actually. Let's. Eddie was heartened by the liquor and followed him with a bounce in his feet. The kitchen was... Yeah, I'm going to stop in a minute. Seriously, what the fuck, man? What? Oh, fuck, no. In his feet, the kitchen was pretty much of a disappointment. After that sumptuous room, just the ordinary kind of a kitchen to be seen anywhere, with a linoleum on the floor, an untidy stove, a greasy sink, and packages of cereal spilling out of the cupboards. I'm a bachelor, haven't had time to clean the place, Slanvik apologised. Don't apologise to Eddie. Don't you fucking apologise to Eddie. He opened 2 cans of food, dumped their contents into pots, and set them on the stove to heat. Yeah, I think I'm really hungry. Okay, gonna stop in a minute, and I'm gonna make myself some food. I've definitely come down with something because I'm going from hot to cold, hot to cold. Could be contributing to the fact that Eddie's really pissing me off, and anyway. Cans of food. Then he drew Eddie through a hall to a door which he unlocked. Beyond was an immense room. Eddie saw then that Slanvik did not live in an apartment house or tenement. He lived in a business building and his rooms were remodeled offices. Oh. There was not a stick of furniture in this particular chamber. Blank white panels in heavily ornamented frames hung all around the walls, as in a picture gallery. "So you're an artist," said Eddie. Aslanvik eyed him without expression. "Yes, but not in the way you're thinking," he acceded. He locked the door and they returned to the kitchen. He indicated that Eddie was to sit, and while he set the table and dished out the food, he questioned, "What do you think about life? Have you any ambitions?" "I just want to have a nice home and a good job." "Yeah, well, maybe you should have just fucking done the right thing." "And your home life? And your home life? What was it like? Okay, what was it like?" So I think we'll leave it there for the moment. This is quite a long. Part 2 is quite long. But I just know in part 2 we're going to be treated to Eddie's tales of woe about his home life and his growing up. I might feel bad when I find out it wasn't nice, but he already said his stepmother was okay, so he's just a pain in the butt. Yes, so that was part 2. I am enjoying this story. I think it's very interesting. No idea what's going on at the moment, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna go and eat something because talk of food has made me hungry. I've probably had too much coffee, and it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Just call me Eddie. Alright, if you've watched to the end of this, thank you very much. I hope you're enjoying this story. I'm enjoying reading it. Yes. I'm gonna leave part 3 till tomorrow. Yes, also, if you've enjoyed the video, please like it. If you would like to subscribe, please subscribe. I do this all the time. Also, if you're interested, I will be posting my, this sweater, the tutorial for this sweater. I enjoyed making it. I enjoy how it's turned out. Yeah, I really love it. It's a really nice sweater. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you for part 3.